So collectively, Gina and I have been in the outdoor kitchen world for over 20 years, if you combine both of us, me for 10 and Gina for 11 or 12. And so we thought for this month that we would just kind of get on here and chat about what we have learned in our time through designing hundreds of kitchens, of outdoor kitchens specifically, and just in working with sales teams and working with designs teams, like we've just seen a lot, and we've seen a lot of different requests, and we get a lot of the same questions over and over again. And so today we thought that we would go through things that we have learned and also kind of the questions that we see the most often. So this episode we're calling Learned Experiences Part 2. We did one last year as well that included kind of some more components about what kind of requests we saw and how we were able to accommodate them with our specific cabinetry systems. This one will be focused a little bit more on the kind of questions we get generally and not necessarily about our specific cabinets. So welcome to May's edition of Design Dialogues. I'll introduce myself really quickly first, and we're actually going to be switching things up a little bit today. So normally I have a guest speaker on with me. I let them do most of the talking, but unfortunately Gina's feeling a little bit under the weather, and so she's going to be doing less talking. I'll be doing more of the talking today, but we've been working together for a really long time. We discussed what we wanted to go through, so don't worry, you're still getting lots of really great information. If anybody has any questions, like I said, please feel free to mention that in the chat, pop them in there. We'll try to monitor that as we go along so that we can answer them while we're on that slide if it is something that's pertaining to what we're talking about. And if not, we can always just get to them at the end. So really quickly, my name is Ashley Smith. I'm the Director of Architect and Designer Partnerships for Plana Group, which is the ownership company of Urban Bonfire and Kalamazoo. I have been working in the industry for 10 years. It's 10 years this year, which is really exciting. And I do have a background in interior design. So coming into this, I did start off as an outdoor kitchen designer. So I was the main outdoor kitchen designer for Urban Bonfire for a long time, and then kind of moved up and around, and now I'm in marketing, but still get to see a lot of designs and still get to interact with the design community a whole lot. I'll let Gina introduce herself, and then we'll get going from there.
I am Gina Armetta. I'm VP of Sales for Plana Group, so the ownership group over Urban Bonfire and Kalamazoo. As Ashley mentioned, it's been more than a decade now that I have been working on outdoor kitchen designs. Similar background to Ashley, and then I also have a background in interior design. I just moved it outdoors, combined it with a love for cooking and people and entertaining. And I think that Ashley sold herself a bit short. Yes, she led the design and sales teams at Urban Bonfire. She's been integral to the Kalamazoo team over the last 4 years since our merger as well. And she's been invited to speak on panels for NKBA, ASLA, AIA. So I think it's always good to know where Ashley is coming from. You see her monthly on these design dialogues, and having her impart all of her knowledge in the industry is also essential. So yes, I'm a little under the weather. I just did another training session with all of our dealer network with a lot of tissues. So I'm going to rely on Ashley's expertise on this one, but I will pop in periodically to add everything that I've learned over the years as well.
Well, thank you, Gina. Very nice. It's always good to get somebody else to talk about you instead of you talking about yourself. So today we really wanted to cover kind of 4 general topics, and within these topics we do have kind of some sub points, but essentially climate appropriate design. This is something that we do get questions about, and that we recently did a few editorial articles. So we worked with a freelance writer, and we interviewed different people in all of the different climates to find kind of what they thought that the most impactful things were for that particular climate and for that particular environment. So I'm going to be summarizing some of those and bringing that to you, but we can also share all of those articles with you as well. I think they're super informative, and they're a great read, if I do say so myself. We're going to talk about mixing materials as well, and how that can be something that you can do to achieve a really cohesive and well planned out outdoor kitchen. We're going to talk about grill ventilation and considerations. So not just vent hoods, but where grills vent from and everything that you need to consider with all of that information. And then we'll finish off with some design tips. So this is more, we get requests for certain design considerations or design requests often, and we're not able to do it. And so we kind of want to explain why we're not able to do it and be able to show you, other ways that you can kind of implement these things so that going forward, all of your designs, hopefully we can say, yes, we can do all of these things. So we'll start off with a climate appropriate design. And I just wanted to start quickly by dividing up the climates. So essentially, within North America, we have basically these 5 different climates that we can break pretty much every region into. So we have continental, which is what I am in Montreal. It means you have hot summers and cold winters and everything that's in between. There tends to be high precipitation, so there's a lot of humidity in these environments as well. You have the dry climate, which tends to be those more arid kind of desert areas. I think that's pretty self-explanatory in dry, not a whole lot of moisture, not a whole lot of humidity, just high heat, high winds usually are factors in these particular climates. We have the highland climate, which would be what Gina is in those kind of higher altitude areas. So you still get the temperature swings. It's not as extreme as a continental climate would be, but you are dealing with higher elevation. And so with that comes UV considerations and all of those fun aspects. The Mediterranean climate tends to be more, I call it the California climate, basically. It's pretty temperate. There's not huge swings within the temperatures. Can be heavy precipitation, but also periods of where it can be quite dry. And yeah, you kind of had those wet seasons and those dry seasons more than the hot and the cold seasons. And then finally, we have the tropical climate. So this is the warmer temperatures, but it does have different seasons as well. And again, it does have that kind of wet and dry season. Tropical climate is a thing of its own. There's a lot of moisture and humidity and everything that falls within it. So that's kind of the breakdown of that. Within each of these climates, there are considerations. So depending where the kitchen is, you do want to make sure that you're considering the climate. So it's an outdoor kitchen. You want people to be using it as much as possible. And so when you're thinking of a continental climate, which again is that hot summer, cold winter, things like a rooftop could be a really great addition. So we're not just talking about materials here, we're talking about everything around the design as well, which will increase the usability of it and hopefully ensure that your clients will be using it more often. So roofs or overhead structures that allows you to add in lighting, which is always really important, especially in those winter months when it gets dark early. It allows you to include heating in those colder months. So on those kind of shoulder seasons, like the springs and the falls, you can certainly add heating there so that you can use it within those times. It's a little bit more comfortable. You do want to choose smart, we're going to say rich materials. So because there is such a swing between the summer and the winter, you do want to make sure that you're choosing a material that can withstand pretty much any environment or any temperature. The only thing you're not really worried about here is corrosion. So you're not really worried about like salt water or anything like that, but you're still getting all of that humidity. You're getting that really cold temperatures, those really hot temperatures, and the swings of everything in between those two. So when you're thinking of anything that has glue as an example. So if you have a mitered edge countertop, that glue might deteriorate quicker over time in an environment like this than it would in kind of that more than that Mediterranean climate as an example. So just little things that you want to think about. It is seasonal. So there are parts of the year where this kitchen will be under snow. And I think that it's important that you consider that in the design because it can still become a focal point. We did an article, like I mentioned, on each individual climate. And it was an architect in Chicago who had said that you kind of use it as like a sculpture. So when it's covered in snow, you still want it to be something beautiful. You still want those sight lines and that kind of artistic beauty to be outside. Even if you're not using your yard, you're still looking at it, hopefully. And then I think it's important to have that strong indoor-outdoor dialogue. So really having that connection between the indoor and the outdoor, even if you're not using it all year round, when you do want to use it, you want to make sure that it's easy to use. I always say that Montreal is a completely different place in the summer than it is in the winter because the city really comes alive. Everybody spends every moment that they can outside. If it's a nice day, every green space has people out there. And so you want to make sure that there's no limitation to what your client can do within their space in these continental climates. As soon as it's nice, they want to be out there. They want to get going and take advantage of all of that outdoor living that maybe they miss during the winter. During the dry climate. The dry climate's not one that I know as well, certainly because I'm in Montreal, and we don't have a lot of those kind of arid areas anywhere near us. But from everything that I've heard and from everybody that I've spoken to, the dry climate certainly has its own challenges and opportunities. So the two things that I would say that stand out here, seasonal sun. So obviously, in dry climates, it can get really, really hot. I'm thinking of like Arizona, where it gets over 100 degrees, New Mexico, where you have to deal with a lot of that as well. So make sure that you're planning for that. So roof structures can be really helpful in continental climates to protect you from snow and rain and everything like that. But it can also be really helpful in a dry climate because it can act as a shade structure. You can also incorporate fans in there so that you have that cooling element that can assist with that as well. Really what you're looking at in a dry climate is UV resistant materials. This is the biggest thing that you're dealing with. You want to make sure that you're using materials that are not going to deteriorate over time. You don't want them to be changing color either in the sun. If you are maybe using a wood or anything like that, be prepared to have some maintenance. You might want to oil them a little bit more often, or you may have to replace them because the sun might dry it out. So things to prepare for. High winds are something also in this particular climate that can be a challenge. So making sure that your cabinetry, as an example, or Kalamazoo does have weather-tight cabinetry, so they do have a gutter system. So if there is high winds, nothing is getting within those cabinets. If you don't have a gutter system or if you don't have a sealed cabinet, make sure that your clients know that there might be the possibility of some dirt or debris getting within those cabinets. So just preparing accordingly, I think, is really important so that your client knows what they can expect. And protection from wildlife. So there are a lot of rodents, I think, in this climate. I think in all climates there are. This is something that you have to deal with. But I think just considering those kind of weather-tight cabinets could be a good option for this particular one. And yeah, sun is really what you're dealing with here, sun and high winds, and those really pose their own challenges. And yeah, I don't like to say issues because I think it's just an opportunity, and you just want to make sure that you are teaching your client so that they know what they can expect within these specific materials. I'm not sure if Gina's just off camera, but Gina, if you want to join in at any time, please feel free. Otherwise, I'll just keep going along. We're in her climate now, so we'll see if she has something to add here. But the Highland climate is, as I mentioned, kind of similar to that continental climate. You do have those shifts from the summers and the winters and the hot and the cold. You are dealing with snow, you're dealing with rain, you're dealing with some kind of those drier seasons as well. But the biggest thing here is really the elevation. So I will say, if you are designing an outdoor kitchen, make sure that you know the effects of the elevation on the grill, as an example. That can be something that you'll need to consider. So make sure that any manufacturer that you're working with knows the elevation. Or that you're in an elevated climate, because they'll be able to tell you, tips and tricks and things like that. Jane, I was just talking about the elevated climate and how that can affect kind of the performance of the grill. You wanted to add to that at
Yes.
all, considering you have to deal with that on a daily basis?
Of course, absolutely. And apologies, I had to reboot my computer. It's just we need a full system reboot on my side. Um, yes, so make sure whenever you're working with a grill manufacturer, let them know that you are at a high altitude because they might have high altitude kits that actually change out the orifices of the grill to make sure that you have the right gas pressure at a high elevation. Here in Denver, I don't need one for my grill that is exactly the one in this picture. But I know that once you get up to 9,000 feet, they're oftentimes needed. The other thing that I wanted to mention before my computer decided that I didn't need to talk today is that, and I see this image, it has a lot of ipe wood. There was an image of Chicago, a project that DSpace did, where there's a lot of ipe wood. The other thing, for no matter the climate that you're really working with in, yes, thank you. This is a great kitchen, but when I look at this, I also think about your client's tolerance for maintenance is a huge factor in no matter in anything that they do. So, for example, if you're using a lot of ipe wood, no matter what, your clients are probably going to say lowest maintenance possible, right? But what is that to them if they have to oil this ipe once a year to make sure that they're maintaining that finish? Will that work for them, or do they want nothing of the type? So tolerance for maintenance, um, no matter the climate that you're in, is a huge consideration.
Yeah, I think it's different maintenance depending on what climate you're in, but I think in the case of wood,
Mhm.
it's pretty much oiled. You need to
Yeah,
oil it no matter what, essentially. Some you have to do with more heat or dryness and others more humidity, but at the end of the day, it kind of needs to be treated the same way.
that's right.
Um, For the highland climate, yeah, it's really that elevation, which also can mean that you're closer to the sun, which means that the UV rays might be a little bit stronger as well. So just consider all of those UV stable materials that you want to use for this environment as well. And I'm going to say this for pretty much, I think, every climate, a roof structure or an overhead structure could be helpful. It just helps you add in all of those little other peripheral elements that can really finish off the project, kind of those invisible elements that really make the space more dynamic and more usable throughout every season. Mediterranean climate is one that you don't need to worry about the seasons as much. And so I think what we talk about the most here, like corrosion, is something that certainly stands out. So these climates do tend to be closer to saltwater environments. So there might be saltwater in the air. Even if you're not directly on the coast, even if you're a few miles in, the saltwater can still travel. So make sure that you know kind of the corrosiveness of the air. Something that Kalamazoo does on their proposals is actually they'll ask you for your zip code or the zip code installation for the particular grill or cabinetry or whatever it is that you're installing so that we can do an analysis on the corrosion in that particular environment. And then we'll suggest whether or not you should be upgrading to a 316L marine grade, as an example. So these are things that you can look for through different companies. It can also be different, or it can be a service that you can add where you're adding value to your client to make sure that you're using the right material for the environment that they're specifically in, which I think is really important. For anything Mediterranean, because it is being used all year round, that maintenance, I think, factor really, really applies here as well. If it's something that they're using every day, if they have to go out and do a lot of cleaning or do a lot of work to be able to actually use this space, then they are going to be less likely to use it. I think this is just human nature. If you put a barrier in front of me, then it makes me think about it before, going forward and actually just enjoying the space. So try to remove those barriers as much as possible would be kind of my biggest, I think, takeaway for this particular climate. Did you want to add anything to that, Gina?
Yeah, I think, the guidance that we really provide to a lot of our clients, we know oftentimes those who can afford a beautiful outdoor kitchen may not be cleaning all of the interiors of their homes themselves. So just including the outdoor kitchen space, excuse me, in the overall cleaning package of the home is one really easy way to get around that hurdle.
Yeah, that's a great point. These a lot of clients or some clients won't be cleaning these themselves, and so making sure that they do have the same consideration for the outdoor kitchen, I think is really important. Something I was just at High Point Market, and something that we talked about, or a word that came up a lot, was intention. And I think that that really applies to outdoors as well. I think this is something that's thought of a lot of indoors, the intention of the space and the intention of how you're going to use it and the materials that you're choosing. And I do see this translating to outdoors, but I think it's still something really important to remember. If you want, again, the clients to use it, make it as easy for them to use as possible, and make it really intentional so that it fits the lifestyle, their particular lifestyle. And then finally, we have tropical climate. Tropical climate is unique in its own way. It has some characteristics from kind of all of the other ones. That corrosive environment is certainly one that you need to think about. And they do get really heavy rain. So in the rainy season, they do get a lot of rain. So that's another one. So like drainage is really important as an example. So knowing where all of the drain patterns are, making sure you're not putting the kitchen basically at the bottom of a hill where all of the water is going to be coming down, or at the farthest end of the yard where all of the slope is going down so that all of the water goes there. Just making those considerations and being sure to orientate the kitchen so that you're not affected by that. Select light tone surfaces. This is something I think in any hot climate basically that you can really consider. So, the darker the material, the more it absorbs the heat. There's certainly more porous materials than others, and some materials that absorb that heat more than others. So just being familiar with that. What we always say, if you're not sure, is to get a sample of the countertop or of the cabinetry and put it outside and just leave it outside. Leave it in a high sun area and then go touch it, and you'll have a really good indicator of how it will feel on a daily basis. Again, in those high sun environments, having a cover will just ensure that it doesn't get as hot to the touch, but there are certain materials that absorb that heat more than others and colors that absorb that heat more than others. In the tropical environment, what we see a lot is these like lanais or these 3-season rooms or kind of like a screened off area. That can certainly be something that you want to consider. I will say if it's a fully screened in porch or one of those 3-seasons rooms, it's not considered outdoors anymore. And so some of the codes and things that apply to outdoors will be different. You'll need to use those indoor codes. So be sure just to check with local bylaws and things for that. I don't know them all by heart. Don't start asking me for individual codes, but I do just want to say that it doesn't fall within the outdoor environment if it is in an enclosed space, even if that space is just screens. Screens are still considered walls. And again, the plan for maintenance. For every climate, overhead structures and maintenance are going to be important. The type of maintenance is just different.
Yeah. I think too, in a lot of these climates, considering it's not just the body of the cabinetry or the countertops, anything like that. It's also all the little components that you want to look at. So if you are putting in a sink and faucet, does that faucet have any little plastic parts that aren't going to do well in sun or anything like that? So thinking about the types of hinging, we love soft close hinges and drawers, but do they have liquid or plastics in them that will degrade really rapidly when they're outdoors? So looking at all the little details too is just sometimes as important as the bigger details.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's funny because on the Urban Bonfire side, we offer all of the cabinetry. If you want to basically source your own handles, you can. And I think the thing that we see the most often with this is that the screws that are provided as an example with the handles are not stainless steel. And so the screws are the things that are rusting, even though the rest of, everything else is standing up. The handle itself is a material that's outdoor rated, but the screw that's provided to put that handle in place is the thing that may corrode over time. So just considering all of the materials in every aspect, that's a really good point, Gina, because sometimes it's little things that you don't even think of that can, cause that rust line to go down the front of your cabinet or down the back of your cabinet. A really good way, this is a great segue, a really good way to make sure that you're using the most appropriate materials, but that it also suits the environment and the architecture and the aesthetic that the kitchen is in, is to use mixed materials. I really like to show this image because I think when anybody thinks of metal cabinets, they think of contemporary or modern. And then you see this image and these metal cabinets, these powder coated metal cabinets fit in here so perfectly within this environment because it really is a chameleon. It really takes on the feel of the finishes and the look and everything that's surrounding it. So keep that in mind. It's not just for modern or contemporary projects. It can really be used for any project. So one good thing or a few good things about using mixed materials and how they can really help achieve a really cohesive project is you want to consider the architecture and the existing landscape. So I do a whole CEU where I talk about the three most important features of an outdoor design is considering the existing architecture, considering the existing landscape, and then considering the human component. You need to achieve all three of these for it to be a successful design. You can't have something that just looks totally different from the architecture of the home and that doesn't fit in with those climates in that environment that we talked about in lesson 1. So two very important things. It does allow for a more seamless design when you're incorporating these elements. So it doesn't look like it was an afterthought. It looks like it was very intentional, to bring that word back up again. Um, and you're not compromising on the quality. So by using metal cabinetry as an example, maybe you have 316L marine grade cabinetry, stainless steel cabinetry that you're putting in a corrosive environment, but the environment, you don't want it to feel maybe as industrial as like a stainless steel usually feels. If you bring in wood tones or you bring in some of those kind of soft natural materials like a natural stone, it will soften down the look of that. And so you're using the best material for the quality and for the environment that you're in, but you're able to soften it up depending on, again, what's surrounding it. So mixed materials, I think, is a really great way to achieve this. And then you can really create something that's a bit more visually intriguing and dynamic instead of just having that metal cabinetry. So we do have 3 examples that I just wanted to show you really quickly. This one I think is a great one because the kitchen itself, all of the cabinetry is that marine, this one is in particular is marine grade aluminum and it's powder coated, but then they incorporated a custom element in the island. So instead of having the cabinetry in the island, they just have this kind of table island that allows for everybody to be social. So you're really part of the party and what's going on here. The chef isn't kind of off in a corner by themselves. And it's bringing in some elements that is already within the outdoor space. So in the bottom picture, on the left-hand side, you can see that there's a wall there that has a TV on it. So it's the same material on that wall that it is in the island. And then in the top image on the right-hand side, you see the 2 columns. It's also that same material. So it really allows it to tie in. And it's just a custom element. It's a custom table that allows people to really use this space and for the kitchen to fit in really seamlessly. For the next one, it's a little bit different because this one is custom framing, but still including cabinetry. And so I think what people sometimes struggle with is that you want to include a lot of counter space for your client, but they don't necessarily need all of that cabinetry because they're not going to be storing so much out there. They're only using the kitchen, maybe a few times a year. And so they don't need all of the extra cabinetry for that. So I find that this project, which was done in Boston, was a really successful application. So you have the custom kind of peninsula that you see in the forefront where all of those stools are. That's a little peninsula. There's no cabinetry in there. And then you have the cabinetry line that's in that return that you see where the grill is. And cabinets are included within this. So it's not access doors. It's still fully functional cabinetry, but it's in a custom frame. So you're still getting all of the advantages of having cabinets and being able to use every square inch of that cabinet, but you're extending the countertop and you're extending the outdoor kitchen space by having these custom components kind of in between them. And then the stone that's used, so the stone that's used on the waterfall cabinetry here, or waterfall countertop, sorry, as well as the countertop top, brings in some of those bluer, like cooler tones from the stone that's used on the stairwell. And then you have the wood, which is bringing in those warm tones from the stairway that you see on the right-hand side there as well. So I think it's really well done here, and it brings in a lot of those other elements from other portions of the yard and allows for a bigger space without too much cabinetry.
I think another little
And then
detail that we always unfortunately have to consider is budget. And I think that this also it creates a really effective, good use of space with the storage components that you would need for grilling tools and pizza tools, whatever might be in this space. But also, I'm sure there was some budgetary savings on the framing. So that can also really help.
Yeah, allows you to have maybe a larger space, but within a smaller budget, or fit within the budget of the project, which is always really important too. That's part of that human component. Budget is part of that. And then for the last case study, I like to show this home because it's really a mix of that kind of modern and farmhouse look. And so you have the home in the background, which you can see there, which has that warm stone, but then it also has that kind of darker, it is a wood, I believe, finish here, but it is in that darker tone. And so they did that same thing with the kitchen here. So all of the kitchen cabinetry is that dark gray. It's that anthracite gray. It's the powder coated cabinets, but then you're continuing the stone wall around it. So the stone wall is surrounding the entire pool. It's basically surrounding the entire property. And then you see it butts up to the back of the kitchen there and then continues on the framing of the outside of the kitchen as well. So it allows it to feel like it's really part of this space. It's, again, very intentional. And there is this I'm going to say parking spot for the kitchen. This is where it belongs. It was supposed to be here, and definitely fits within the aesthetic of the home as well as the rest of the environment that's surrounding it. So another kind of mixing of the old and new there, which I really like. That was it for the case studies. I am going to get into grill ventilation and considerations. I will take a pause right now to see if there are any questions. I haven't seen any come through the chat, but please don't be shy. We do like to hear from people as we go along. If you want to save your question for the end, again, that's also fine, but feel free to put it in as you think of it so that you don't forget it. In the meantime, I'll move on to grill ventilation and considerations. So I did a whole other design dialogues just on outdoor ventilation. So if this is the reason that you are here, please go check that one out as well, because it does have a lot more information on there. And I do have two ventilation experts who are on there. I did learn from them. And so that's kind of going to be the summary of what I include here. But if you want more information, reach out to me and I'll be happy to share that recording with you. But ventilation isn't just about a vent hood. So there are other considerations that you need to think about. The first question that you want to be asking is where does the grill vent from? Because the vast majority of grills do vent from behind. And so what does that mean? That means a few different things. The first one of which is that behind the grill will get dirty. It will get greasy. It will get oily. Outdoor cooking is messy. You're using a lot of oils. And so guaranteed the wall behind the grill will not look the same as the rest of it. It will be darker. It will have that oil on it. So make sure that it's a non-combustible material as well. A lot of the grills have required distances to a combustible surface or a non-combustible surface. So make sure that you are adhering to those guidelines. It's very important. You don't want to have any issues with the wall behind the grill. It can get really hot and all of those grease vapors and everything are coming out from behind there. A way that you can achieve that is by including a backsplash. So we're showing a tile backsplash here. You can put the countertop, you can continue the countertop behind the grill. It can allow you to really add that kind of artistic element to it as well. So every indoor kitchen has a backsplash. It tends to be a focal point of the kitchen. So you can kind of have fun with it and include that in the outdoor as well. Urban Bonfire does offer a slat wall backsplash, which allows you to kind of put in hooks and different planters and things like that. So do feel free to ask us about that. And anytime there's a combustible material behind, make sure that you are accounting for that. Any backsplash that you use, you do want it to be a really easy to clean material because again, it will have those vapor barriers or those grease vapor and everything on it. So if it's the aluminum backsplash, you can just hose it down. If you use the countertop material, you can usually just wipe it down, but again, it will get dirty. So just make sure that it is easy to maintain. And then another thing that you want to consider is if a grill vents from behind, you want to make sure that the wind isn't coming from behind the grill because that can get in the vents and it can snuff out the burner. Just a little thing to consider. So either orientate the grill so that the back isn't to the prevailing wind, or we do have wind screens and like high wind kits that you can get with a lot of different manufacturers. So make sure that you know where the wind is coming from so that your client isn't dealing with burners going out all the time.
And more than that, most professional grills, all of their wiring harnesses and all of that are in the front. They're in the control panel. So if you've got wind coming at the back and the burners blowing toward that, it's not an ideal situation. So you really have to think about that and consider it when you're site planning.
And it makes it more enjoyable for the person who's cooking too. If the wind is coming at them, then all of those vapors and everything are coming at them as well, which I would imagine would not be very pleasant. So yeah, make sure you know where the wind's coming from and where the grill vents from, because that will really help.
It'll also smoke out your guests if all of your guests are behind you when you're standing at that grill and all of the smoke and everything is going toward them. So thinking about that.
We want everybody to be having a good time in these outdoor spaces. Don't want them to have to go inside.
That's right.
Is ventilation required? This is a question we get extremely often. And to be perfectly honest, there's no simple answer for it. So I'm going to do my best to kind of give you rules of thumbs and guidelines that you can go by. But check local code always, always, always before we do anything else. And know really if it's considered outdoors or not. So we did talk about this before when we were talking about alumni. If the space is enclosed, even if it screens, it's not considered to be outdoors. It is considered to be indoors. And so then you would have to adhere to any indoor regulation on ventilation. So that's something that's really important that I think a lot of people don't realize, because screens do breathe and it's not a full wall, but according to regulation, it is considered to be an indoor space if it is completely screened off. We do have a document about this. I can provide that to anybody who would like it. It basically breaks down what is considered outdoors and what isn't. If it is considered outdoors, then typically a vent hood is not required. The only limitation to a lot of cooking appliances is that they cannot have a combustible surface above. And so a lot of ways that people get around having a combustible surface above is by including that vent hood, because it's the non-combustible surface between the grill and the combustible surface that is the roof structure. This is a perfect example that you see on the right-hand side here. This is a beautiful wood roof with a grill that uses gas and also uses solid fuel. So you can really have a wood fire in this grill. And so you want to make sure that you do not have a wood, no matter how high above it is, you do not want to have a wood structure above that. And so that's how they got around it here, is that they included that integrated vent hood, which also looks really beautiful and it looks like a great part of the project. It really kind of seamlessly fits in. If you do want to include a vent hood, our recommendation is to make sure that the canopy, so the size of the vent hood, is bigger than the cooking appliance that it is covering. And you're opening up a grill, consider this. It's not like an oven where everything is just going straight up. When you're opening a grill, everything's coming out and then going above. And so if you just have a vent hood that's just at the back, as an example, then it's not going to catch all of those vapors and everything that are coming out from the front of the grill. It will miss those. So it does need to be strong, and the canopy does need to be larger. These are the takeaways that I got from the discussion. Like I said, there is a full discussion with two professionals who know everything there is to know about outdoor or ventilation in general. And so if you are interested in learning more about that, I would suggest listening to that one. Is there anything that you've picked up? I know, Gina, I think because you've worked on the Kalamazoo side for longer, you probably have gotten more questions about ventilation. Any other tips that you would want to add there?
Yeah, so many questions. I think you hit on one point about it briefly, but probably the number one question that we get about overhead structures, or do I need a vent hood, is what is the height restriction? Uh, the restriction is no overhead combustible structures. It doesn't matter the height. That is part of a certification of any gas outdoor appliance. So it's not us as a manufacturer just kind of arbitrarily saying this is the restriction. It is actually part of the certification. So at any height, it could be 30 feet up. Technically speaking, that's a no-go. So you have to find alternatives to the height restriction as well.
Yeah, we do get asked that a lot. Like, what if it's 100 feet? Still, technically, no. I don't know why you would want a roof 100 feet above your head, but it's probably not doing a whole lot. But any other questions about ventilation? I do say that there are some questions coming in, and so I will address those. It doesn't seem like there's any specific to this topic. So I'll just finish off with the design tips, and then we can come back to those. But if there are any about ventilation in particular, please feel free to add them in here as well. So I'm going to finish off with just some design tips. I think there are 4 that we really wanted to include in here. And again, these are just things that we see the most often. So we just want to get ahead of that to make sure that you have all of the tools that you need to be able to successfully implement an outdoor kitchen design. So the first thing you should know, as I have aptly called it, is consider whether your client is left-handed or right-handed and plan the design accordingly. So things that you want to think about. If your client is right-handed, as an example, then a lot of the time they're probably going to be picking things up with their right hand. And so their right hand will be in use. And so placing the trash, as an example, to the left of the grill can be really helpful, because then it just makes it really easy for them to open it up and to not have to kind of like walk around to the space to be able to access it really easily. Same thing for landing zones, which is something we talk about a lot on outdoor kitchens, is you always want to make sure that you have a platter or a place to be able to put something down. So if you're right-handed or if your client's right-handed, make sure it is to the right of the grill, again, because that's what they're going to be using to be picking it up. So it just makes it really easy, and it considers the ergonomics and of the design of the outdoor kitchen. And again, limits those barriers, just makes it easier to use, which will encourage the client to use it more often. And everything that I just said, it's the opposite, obviously, if the client is left-handed. And there's other considerations too, where you're putting your tools as an example, or where you have the most counter space, or where serving is, and things like that. So just get to know your client so that you can design according to their lifestyle and whether they're left-handed or right-handed. Just a small little tip. I see that Leanne just said good job on ventilation, so I'm going to call out to her because she is one of the experts who was on my panel, who has taught me everything that I know. So thank you, Leanne. I appreciate that. Second thing that you should know is that fridges are not load bearing. And so you do need to plan for some sort of support next to a fridge. So often we do get design requests to have a fridge on the end of a run, which I completely understand. I know why people are doing it. They want people to just be able to help themselves and not get in the way of anybody cooking. I do understand that, but you really want to make sure that you are including some sort of support next to it. So we've developed a couple of different cabinetry options for this on the Kalamazoo and Urban Bonfire side, although here they're both Urban Bonfire. On the top one, it's just that 4-inch cabinet. It's literally just a support cabinet that we created so that you could have that additional support next to the refrigerator. You're bringing electricity in there anyway, so it's also a really easy way to be able to put an outlet onto the front of the cabinetry, especially when you're in a situation like this where there's no wall behind, so you don't have those backsplash outlets. It is something I will say that we tell people to include is additional outlets and things so that you can plug in, yard tools if you want to, anything like that, but also small kitchen appliances like blenders or air fryers, or maybe you're bringing out an induction cooker. So just make sure that you account for those electrical outlets. Another thing that we really like to show is the open shelving cabinet, which is the bottom right-hand image that you see there. And again, that really just encourages people to be able to come, they can take their glass, they can take their beverage, and then they can get out of the way so that they're not in the way of anybody who's cooking. So it allows for easy access for those kind of elements, so people don't have to open up cabinetry or ask questions about where things are. The third thing you should know is slope. All outdoor spaces, with the exception of, I guess, pedestal rooftops, are sloped. So this is something that we have certainly seen, and we've seen extreme versions of it. At High Point Market, actually, when I was there, that was one of the largest slopes that we have ever encountered. And so just be prepared. Know the slope of the space so that you can plan accordingly. So any standard slope, which I don't know off the top of my head, and I don't know, Gina, if you know like what the greater percentage is, but essentially any standard slope can accommodate about 10 to 15 feet of a cabinet run before it runs out or before you need to have some sort of pad under it. I see that you unmuted yourself, Gina, so I'll let you add to that.
It depending again on the climate, but it tends to be 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch per foot of slope. So that's why we say it's usually closer to 1/8 an inch in an ideal scenario.
Perfect. This is good to know. I learned something today too. I usually do in these sessions, which is very nice. Urban Bonfire and Kalamazoo Cabinetry has about just under 2 inches of adjustability within their legs. And so you really want to make sure that you're starting off at the highest point and you have the legs all the way to the shortest point so that you're maximizing the use of those adjustable legs. Because if you're not hitting over that kind of it's I think 1 inch and 7/8, if I'm not mistaken. If you're able to do that within the legs, then you don't need to account for any level pad or anything under it. It's really if it gets outside of those 2 inches of adjustability that you'll need to plan to have some sort of level surface under it. It'll make it honestly more enjoyable as well. And the cabinetry with the grill in it and also with the countertop and everything, it does end up it can be quite weighty, especially the stainless steel cabinets. They already do have quite a mass to them. So you don't want them to be on legs that are too tall because you're essentially putting them on a stilt, which you don't want to do. So if you do have an extreme slope, maybe consider having a level concrete pad underneath the kitchen, and then we can accommodate that with toe kicks and things so that it looks fully integrated into the rest of the project. Lesson 4, and again, one that we talk about quite a bit, things you should know, don't overcrowd the outdoor kitchen. I think this is something that's always really tempting because there are a lot of bells and whistles and gadgets and things that you can put in the outdoors. And you think of all of the things that you can't do indoor. And so you want to include that in the outdoor kitchen. But I think one of the most important questions that you can ask is, how often are you going to be doing multiple types of cooking at the same time, as an example? So something that we get requests for is like a flat top cooking surface. How often do you need the flat top cooking surface versus can you just have an insert that you're putting into your existing grill? Will that suffice for the, couple of times a year that you want to make it, as an example? My husband loves smash burgers. We make smash burgers all the time. We do not have a dedicated flat top griddle for this. We do have a surface inside our barbecue, and I can tell you that it works extremely well and also allows you the full functionality of the barbecue. So you can swap it out for other surfaces so that you're not limited to just using that flat top griddle surface. Maintain landing zones. So by putting in too many different types of appliances, you're eliminating countertop. And I always say the best advantage of having an outdoor kitchen is that you have preparation space, you have countertop space, as well as storage space. By including too many of these appliances, you're losing both of those things. And so make sure that you are planning for those landing zones. So next to any cooking appliance or any sink or anything like that, you do want to have about 2 feet of space to each side so that it is usable functional space so that you can put something down. And then the
I think
last
the
thing that I do
easiest
want to
way
point out is
to
that cabinets can be used. Go ahead.
sorry. I think the easiest way to explain it to clients who are trying to overextend their appliance selection is, even a lot of them have cooked on a Weber or some sort of gas freestanding grill previously, right? Even a, a gas freestanding grill has two shelves on either side where you put down your tongs and your platter. And once they get that image in their head that there would be eliminating even that, then it makes it a little bit easier to help get them through the process.
Thank you, Gina. Yeah, that's a great point. It's funny because I've heard you say that before, and I've definitely added that into my presentation. Usually, you have those two shelves at the bare minimum, so make sure that you're at least incorporating that amount of space. And then, yeah, the last point was just that cabinetry doesn't need to be just used for kitchen equipment or things that you're using in the kitchen. I added 2 additional cabinets to my outdoor kitchen just to include my cushions. So all of my couch cushions and chair cushions, all of my outdoor cushions are put into my kitchen cabinets, which I'm sad to say was not my idea. It was my husband who is not in design. He was the one who thought of this. But I'm so thankful because now we have a place, a really easy place to put all of these cushions. And so you can extend the countertop. But again, we had kind of talked about this with that project in Boston. You might not necessarily need all of that additional storage. You might not be using, like, keeping things out there or storing things out there. But think of different items. So like gardening equipment, pool toys, soccer balls, like anything that people can use outside, basically can be stored within these cabinets. So don't limit it to just kitchen use. I like to show this project that we have on the right-hand side here because you have the grilling area that's at the back where the grill is. It's a little L kitchen. But then you also have this cabinetry, which is essentially like a credenza. So the dining table is right in front of this area, and this is where they're including all of those kind of serving utensils and plates and platters and things like that. And it's also acting as a bar area. So there's no cooking equipment in this at all, but it's still a really well-used space. Very well designed. That is everything. Those are the 4 tips. I did not think that we would be talking this long. We did go through a lot of information here. I'm excited to see what some of the questions were that came through. But really quickly, just as a conclusion, I say this every single webinar that I do, but the best design is the one that meets the aesthetics and the needs of the user. That's really it. At the end of the day, it has to fit the lifestyle of your client. And that includes where they are, what materials you're choosing, what the environment looks like, and also just how they use it. So make sure that you really get to know your client so that you can design a space that's specific to them. Consider the climate when choosing materials, not just materials, but also just the overall design. Make sure that you're accounting for the limitations or the challenges of that particular environment. Mixing materials sometimes can be a really good way to do that and allow you to have a really cohesive design while using still the best materials that you can. And know where the appliance is vent from and plan backsplash ventilation, anything that you need accordingly. So that is it for today. We're going to open it up to questions. I did see some come through, so I'll see if maybe I can just go back in the chat and see where they begin. But if anybody has any additional questions, please feel free to add them in now. Judy, I do see your request for the guidelines. I can include that in the follow-up. So what we'll do after this session is I'll include the recording of the session so that you can rewatch it. And we'll also include any additional kind of documentation or things that you'd like. So I'll be sure to include the indoor out versus outdoor definition so that you can look at that. And I'll also include a link to all of our past sessions. So if anybody wants to check out that ventilation session, please feel free to do so. And then, okay, there was a question that came in that says, when designing kitchens in different climates or outdoor spaces, how do you adapt your material selection to ensure both durability and a cohesive aesthetic that fits the environment? I think maybe, I'm not sure when this question came in, and I think maybe we covered it a little bit throughout, but I can kind of give a summary here, depending on the environment. So you want to know the most challenging part of the environment, I would say, because that's really what you want to be planning for. So in a continental climate, as an example, it's the extreme, it's the heave, the thaw. Like that's going to be the most challenging part. In a dry environment, it's really the heat and it's that high wind, like really dry environment. I'm going to try and remember these all off the top of my head without going back. In the highland climate, it's really the elevation, which also has those UV deterioration elements that you want to consider. In a Mediterranean climate, it is, what is the challenge? I honestly think the Mediterranean climate might be perfect.
Maintenance, though, it's still it's
corrosive.
because it's used. You can use it
Yes,
year round, right? Maintenance. Happy to step in and remind you.
Yeah, thank you. And also salt water. A lot of these environments do have that saltwater air, and so you're dealing with that corrosion. And then for tropical climate, it's really those heavy rainfall and also that corrosive like humidity element as well. And so what you're designing for is the hardest part of that particular climate because that means it'll withstand all of the easier parts of it. And so I hope that I answered the question there, Jorge. If you have anything that you want to add to that, please feel free. But I think a lot of the ways that you can do this, and again, where I see the most success is when you're using different materials. So again, use the best material that you can for the grill and for the cabinetry, because that is something that will be staying there that you do not want to be replacing. But then the outside of it, you can clad in different materials like a stone, like a wood. Sometimes, you'll see it completely in that countertop material because that tends to be UV resistant and not affected by any sort of heat or cold or anything like that. So just know what the best material is for the environment and try to use that as much as possible. I hope that answered the question. Gina, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think that you got it. Yeah, good job.
You covered it. Perfect. And then there is a question that I'm not sure I'm going to be able to answer, Joshua. So I apologize, but I can also look into this, and I like learning new things as well. So a new indoor island codes does not allow electric outlets on the side of an island, which I did hear because I think people were hitting them too much, basically, like running into them. So what about outdoors? I have not heard this in outdoor. Gina, I don't know if you've gotten this question.
Yeah. We have not heard of a change yet to outdoors. I do think one major difference between indoors and outdoors is that the outdoors do require a GFI outlet. That might be the case indoors. I know it's definitely required outdoors. They also are required to be covered. So to keep all elements, moisture, of course, things of that nature away from the outlet itself. So that might be taking care of the code requirement there, but who knows what they might change as outdoor kitchens are evolving. I will say that lots of codes also update to include the outdoor kitchen part. So who knows if that will change in the future.
But that's a great question, Josh, or Joshua, sorry, shortened your name. I had heard that for indoors, and it is always good to know because we tend to see outdoor regulation kind of changes after the indoor regulation, so you can kind of predict what might be coming kind of down the line. I think in the webinar that I did last month, they talked about pop-up outlets, which I didn't know were available for outdoors, but apparently there are a few companies who do offer them for outdoors as well. So that can always be a good way to get around that, to not have it on the front of the cabinet if that is something that's coming down the line.
I think
All
really though,
right, those
anytime
were
that
the
you
only
can
questions that kind of came
incorporate,
through.
sorry,
Go
anytime
ahead.
that you can incorporate any type of, even just if it's a small like pony wall, anything like that area in your outdoor kitchen, or like we discussed when we were talking about ventilation and wind inside the grill hood, if you're able to incorporate some type of small wall behind the grilling area that would then also incorporate some electrical outlets, would be ideal.
Those were all the questions that we had come in. I just checked the Q&A section as well, and I don't see anything new in there. If anybody has anything, I'll stay on for a minute or two just to make sure that we do address them. Maybe somebody's typing something in as we speak right now. But for anybody else, please feel free to jump off. We did pretty much fill up the hour. I appreciate you coming today. Thank you so much. And thank you to Gina for joining us, even though you were under the weather. I'm glad that you could still participate, and it's always good to have somebody else to kind of bounce ideas off of and include in the conversation.
Appreciate being here. Thanks, Ashley.
All right. Monica will be sure to send all of the information over to anybody who attended, and also we send it to anybody who registered. So if you have any colleagues who maybe registered but weren't able to make it, don't worry, we'll send it out to them as well. All right. Well, with that, we will sign off. Thank you so much again to everybody who joined today. And Gina, yes, please do feel better soon. We hope that you start to feel better.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.